finally happened today, the moment the entire country has been waiting for nearly 3 weeks. The Trump affidavit finally dropped this afternoon. Those on the far left have been waiting with bated breath for the smoking gun, irrefutable evidence that they will soon see Donald Trump in an orange jumpsuit. The far right, meanwhile, is ready to try and convict the FBI in court of public opinion as nothing more than a politicized, corrupt federal agency filled with a bunch of hacks. But as you know, here on this show, we are not in the business of peddling in political extremes to feed the partisan outrage machine. We'd rather just tell you the facts. And truth be told, after weeks of waiting, neither extremes got what they were so desperately hoping to see today. The Justice Department's redacted version of the FBI search affidavit, with nearly half of the 38 pages blacked out, does reveal some new information about the DOJ's criminal inquiry into the handling of classified documents by the former president and those around him. But there is no smoking gun, at least not from the parts that we can read. We did learn some new information on what led up to the DOJ's extraordinary search on the private home of the former president. The focus of the affidavit, the parts that we can at least see anyway, is on 15 boxes of material the National Archives received from Mar-a-Lago in January. Documents Trump voluntarily handed over. The next month, the agency contacted the DOJ after realizing the boxes contained, quote, newspapers, magazines, printed news articles, photos, miscellaneous printouts, notes, presidential correspondence, personal and post-presidential records, and a lot of classified records. Of most significant concern was that highly classified records were unfolded, intermixed with other records and otherwise improperly identified. During an FBI review of the materials in mid-May, agents found that 14 of those boxes, according to the FBI, contained, quote, 184 unique documents bearing classification markings, including 67 documents marked as confidential, 92 documents marked as secret, and 25 documents marked as top secret. Documents classified at these levels typically contain national defense information. Several of the documents also contained what appears to be former President Trump's handwritten notes. Now, that is new information. We didn't know the exact number of those documents prior to this affidavit coming out today. Some of the documents were labeled HCS, which actually refers to human intelligence sources. The affidavit reveals the DOJ was concerned that those spies could be compromised if the documents fell into the wrong hands, and that is at least in part what motivated the search. Now, in making its case for a search warrant, the DOJ wrote to the judge, further, there is probable cause to believe that additional documents that contain classified national defense information currently remain at Mar-a-Lago. There's also probable cause to believe that evidence of obstruction will be found at the premises. And in a memo accompanying the release of the affidavit, we learned for the first time that the DOJ's investigation relies on a significant number of civilian witnesses. That is also new. So that brings us to what we still don't know. And as we discussed, we got a lot of info on why the FBI thought it had probable cause to believe there was classified material at Mar-a-Lago, yet we are still left in the complete dark about why the DOJ claims there was also probable cause for obstruction. Parts of the affidavit that could support that assertion appear to be redacted, like so much of it. But earlier this month, the New York Times reported that during a visit by DOJ counterintelligence chief Jay Bratt to Mar-a-Lago back in June, at least one lawyer for former President Trump signed a written statement asserting that all material marked as classified and held in boxes in a storage area at Mar-a-Lago had been returned to the government. Now, that's a big if that's true, that could be one of the factors behind the obstruction charge. But we still don't know because those portions, again, of the affidavit remain totally blacked out and under seal still tonight. And to be clear, we still don't know exactly what federal agents eventually found in the 11 sets of classified material that they carted away from the president's home after the actual raid happened. And Trump's lawyers have argued the former president had the power to declassify the material found at Mar-a-Lago. In fact, attached to the affidavit, they actually included a letter sent by Trump attorney Evan Corcoran in late May to the DOJ. By that time, news reports reports were already leaking information about a potential DOJ investigation. And in that letter, Trump's legal team makes clear that they believe a president has absolute authority to declassify documents, and presidential actions involving classified documents are not subject to criminal sanction. Trump responding to the affidavit's release on social media today, calling the investigation a, quote, witch hunt. He's used that word before, and saying affidavit heavily redacted, nothing mentioned on nuclear, total public relations subterfuge by the FBI and DOJ, or our close working relationship regarding document turnover. We gave them much. And a spokesperson for Trump tweeting, quote, this is a grave travesty, and what is unredacted only further supports President Trump's position. There was no reason for a raid. It is all politics. Okay, joining me now to discuss, former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Gene Rossi, and Trent Shores, a former federal prosecutor appointed by Donald Trump. Gentlemen, thank you both for coming on. You know, for the most part, this is really mostly what we expected. I think a lot of printers probably today like running out of black ink because there's so much that's redacted. It's like these big black boxes. But there were some interesting takeaways. I want to start with you, Gene. They talk about obstruction. What do you make of that?
Well, first off, thanks for the promotion. I was not U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. My colleague on this show was a U.S. Attorney. I was a mere AUSA, an Assistant U.S. Attorney.
Okay, we got it right now.
But I'll take the promotion anyway.
Okay.
What is obstruction? And as my colleague will say, when you investigate substantive crimes, allegations that are alleged here in the affidavit, subsection E of the Espionage Statute, the Records Act, when you add obstruction, it's a prosecutor's dream, if you can prove it. Because when an individual or targets or subjects obstruct an investigation, that's almost like consciousness of guilt. They know they're doing something wrong because they're being investigated. So when they establish probable cause for obstruction, that was very important. But I got to say this. I respectfully disagree just a little bit. I think the big story here, the big tell, is not what's unredacted, it's what's redacted. And in my experience, almost 30 decades as a 30 years as a AUSA prosecutor, when I redacted things, I usually redacted a name, social security, date of birth. But here, they are redacting a ton of information. And that ton of information, to me, is a red flag and loud gong that there's some serious, serious stuff here. And this redaction was blessed by a judge, not a political, a judge.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of redactions. Trent, what do you think about the fact that they talk about multiple witnesses, which is likely one of the reasons for all these redactions to protect those names at this point? But this is the first time we've seen those words, multiple witnesses.
Sure. I mean, anytime you have an investigation like this, the U.S. Attorney's Office or a federal agent is going to look to all of their possible sources of information. And oftentimes those are other humans. Those are witnesses that may be close to the individual who is a target of the investigation or who is a subject of the investigation. And so in this case, we've heard a lot of speculation about former President Trump's inner circle or those who are affiliated or around him who may have seen things and then reported those to the FBI. But the answer here is we don't know. There is still a lot to be unredacted. And the fact of the matter is we don't know if multiple witnesses include a lot of folks from the National Archives that went down there to look at information and then spilled the beans to the FBI, calling foul on the fact that they found some notes that they wanted to have from the former president.
When I saw multiple witnesses, though, Trent, the first thing I thought, and you're right, we don't know because it's redacted, but the first thing I thought is former President Trump sitting there seeing that and thinking, are there people on the inside working with me that are cooperating, that are underneath this blacked out area? Are these people that I trust?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Anytime you are the subject of an investigation and you read something like that, I think that is a natural question to ask. It's probably a smart one to ask. that trust of your inner circle is critical, not just to a president, but to any leader or executive. What we've seen is that President Trump relies on his inner circle to give him good counsel and advice. And if someone is breaking that trust, breaking that confidentiality, then we have some very serious concerns here. And the president should be mindful of that and should be looking to ensure that his team is true to him.
Gene, it's pretty clear at this point that this is a criminal investigation. Obviously, you know, most people in the media focus in on the former president, but do you think it's possible that if there are charges, it could be other people who are charged, people under former President Trump?
Oh, that's possible, and there may be no charges at all. I've had search warrants executed, and at the end of the day, there was one case where I probably should have charged somebody, but it's possible there won't be anybody charged, and it's possible there could be people under Donald Trump that are charged, but not him. Exhibit A is Michael Cohen bit the bullet and pleaded guilty to the Stormy Daniels scam, and I was intimately involved in that, representing a witness, but President Trump was, you know, an alleged conspirator, but he wasn't charged. You could have that situation.
Right. I mean, Gene, could they be telling themselves right now, the DOJ, okay, we got the documents back, and let's just be done with this? Is that a possibility?
No. In for a dime, in for a dollar. To me, it's like a snowball. When they got this search warrant, and I can't stress enough, and my colleague Trent will hopefully agrees with this, we're talking about getting a search warrant of the home of the former president of the United States of America. There were probably 40 lawyers in the Department of Justice, 40 lawyers in the FBI looking at it and scrubbing this. FBI Director Wray, a Republican appointee by Donald Trump, approved this affidavit. This is a big deal. And when you have something like this, it's a snowball going down a hill, and it's hard to stop it. And the lead on this is not just some line attorney, not just some AUSA like I was. This is the head of the section on counterterrorism, Jay Pratt.
Yep.
I hope I got his name right. But he's the head. That tells us a lot right there, that this is extremely serious, and they're just not going to give someone a slap on the wrist and let it go. If they have the goods, if they have enough to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. If they have that.
Trent, do you agree? I mean, do you think, obviously, the fact that this is a former president, this had to be signed off by the AG himself. He said that he approved it, and a lot of people were looking this over clearly before they did it. I mean, do you think that means that it's legit?
I don't know that it means that it's legit, but we do know that this is absolutely unprecedented. And we know when we look historically in recent years, the acts of, say, a Jim Comey or an Andy McCabe, that the public has lost its confidence in what is a great institution in the Department of Justice and the FBI. And so when we have this being reviewed at the highest levels, when you have Director Wray, when you have Attorney General Garland looking at this, that is an indication that they understand the seriousness of the actions that they have undertaken. And I certainly hope, for the sake of the integrity of the system and the institution itself, that they have more than we have seen so far. This can't just be about trying to get some presidential records back for the archives, even if those are some that the president wished to keep for, say, writing a biography or an autobiography about his presidency.
Yeah, I mean, we're all waiting to see what else there is. We don't know yet. Trent and Gene, stay with us. We've got a lot more to talk about.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.